I'm going to read you one of my short stories. Right now, I am in this amazing studio at the Banff Center for the Arts. This is my first day here. I have so many different writing projects I want to work on. But first, I'm going to read you a story. So, this story is the first story in my book, I Am Claude Francois and You Are a Bathtub. Now, this book didn't really shake the whole literary world. I think maybe 19 people read it. I don't know. But I think it's a really good book of stories, and I think it starts with a really terrific story. But it's a story that I don't think I can read anymore for reasons that will become apparent soon. I used to love reading it at readings, but I think this will be the last time that I read it aloud. It's called The Elements of the Short Story. Writing a short story is essential to creating conflict. This should happen on the first page. Begin in the middle of the action. She hits him on the head. He loses his job. The chaplain repairs the clock. Water skiing. You have 8 seconds to grab the reader's attention. Have characters. Before you begin to write, you should know everything about the setting. Where is the water fountain? Who built the piazza and in what year? Even if these facts never appear in your actual story, etc., etc. Having been hit on the head by her, where does he fall? If you don't know this before you begin writing, you are someone who can't write this story. Do you have another job? You are not fully committed to writing the short story unless you have quit your job or unless you are unemployed to begin with. Begin at the beginning, which is in the middle of the action. Don't get bogged down in exposition. The chaplain who bent over the steering wheel of the car is wearing a hat his grandfather passed down to him, who was a prisoner of war in Poland during the Second World War. The grandfather dreamed of coming to America, but he couldn't afford passage on the ship for his mentally handicapped younger sister, your great aunt, so he stayed and faced his implausible doom in Eastern Europe. How did his hat then get to America? How did it wind up on the chaplain's head? Water skiing immediately creates suspense because it is fun but dangerous. Did I say implausible doom above? Do you think I meant it? No, I did not. I meant inevitable doom. Word choice is very important in the short story. In the novel, it doesn't matter so much, nor in poetry, but the short story is a compressed form and every word counts, so it is good to use the exact word you meant for the exact situation. Why does he lose his job? Because he is tired? No, the exact word is lazy. He lost his job because he is lazy. They are similar words, but one of them is different from the other, and as a short story writer, you must know these differences. She hit him over the head deftly. The water skier fell into the water suddenly. He lost his job lazily. To write well, read as much as possible and circle the words you will use in your own writing. Where is the water fountain? Is it near where she hit him on the head? Is near precise enough? It is 1 block from where she hit him on the head, having been built on the piazza, which was built in 1832 during the Habsburger dynasty. If you have characters, you will have no problem creating conflict if they are humans, because humans are naturally in conflict. Be sure it happens in the first paragraph, or you risk losing your readers. When you do read broadly, or as much as possible, read the greats and deep read. If you do not know what deep read, a word I invented, means, look at the 2 words that it is comprised of and sound them out deftly. The story Boys and Girls by noted short story writer Alice Munro is a perfect example. My father was a fox farmer, it begins. And before you have even departed the first paragraph, you will find the Hudson's Bay Company, savages, calendars, forest, and a kitchen door. It is literally impossible to put the story down. Before you read on, deep read the first sentence. Okay, now that you have deep read it, let us examine its elements. How Monroe had no choice but to use each of those specific words to open her story, Boys and Girls, 1962. She writes, "my" first. This immediately grasps the reader by the collar because even in that very first word, the writer refers to herself. If we look just a little further in the sentence, we stumble upon the word father. My father. This offers clues to the story setting. The story takes place in a patriarchy, and likely the person who is talking the story, which we call narrating, is a member of a nuclear family. Because she was born, her father was likely a heterosexual, although it never pays to make assumptions. Not long after that, you zero in on the word was. We don't even know the next word yet, but what is clear is that it is something her father no longer is. My father was. Mrs. Monroe could easily have stopped at these three words and have written a well-regarded story that would cinch her place in Canadian literature. But she ups the ante by following was with a bold stroke. Why not water skiing? My father was water skiing. A verb would have plunged us almost immediately into the action, but our writer adds the element of surprise by employing an article. Not just any article, but an indefinite article, the article a. My father was a. So not only is the reader commanded to wait a little longer to find out what the writer's father was, but once you find it out, it will not even be definite that that's what the writer's father was. The next word in the story Boys and Girls is fox. My father was a fox. In the story then, is the story then not being told by a human? As we've learned earlier, it is humans who are naturally in conflict. So will this story not contain conflict? We know that it contains suspense, one of the elements of the short story, because of the fourth word, a, which is indefinite. But now we find there will be no conflict? We simply picture the writer's father scampering through the woods. But perhaps he is looking for prey. Therein lies the conflict. If the father is a fox, then does that mean the story was also written by a fox? Is Mrs. Monroe, who we at first assumed to be human, actually a fox? Astute readers will be familiar with the wild boy of Aveyron. Also known as Victor, he lived in the woods until the age of 12, just 1 year short of his bar mitzvah had he been a Jewish child, and raised by feral wolves. Wolf is a common Jewish surname. Nevertheless, on January 8th, 1800, just 7 days after the celebration of the New Year, with all its attendant hoopla and merrymaking, Victor emerged from the woods. If you deep read that, you will immediately realize that while Victor is a human, he was raised by wolves. Therefore, it is clear that Mrs. Monroe was raised in the woods by feral foxes, including her aforementioned father. But wait! We are not finished the first sentence of the classic story, Boys and Girls. Hidden at the very end of the first sentence is the word that is most often referred to in literary circles as the caboose. The final word, the clincher. When I used the word cinch earlier to describe how Mrs. Monroe established her place in the pantheon of Canadian literature, it's possible I might have meant clinched. But it is not the job of the author to explain his or their self. It is the job of the reader to interpret, given the reader's own age, sex, race, job, and life experience. The caboose, however, of Mrs. Monroe's first sentence is farmer. Incredible! Her father was not a fox at all. He did not search for his prey in the forest. He was, in fact, a man who farmed foxes. He was a fox farmer. Let us examine the full sentence once more. My father was a fox farmer. Had Mrs. Monroe written no more than those 6 words, she would easily have clinched her immortal position in the annals of Canadian literature. You would be selling your self-published pamphlets of poetry on the street, and she would stop to examine them. not recognizing her because she looked ordinary. You would ask if she herself was a writer, because many who stop to look at your pamphlets are themselves writers. A gentle smile would spread across her ordinary face. Yes, she would respond. Have you published? You would ask her. Yes, she would respond, her kind smile deepening slightly. What is your name? Perhaps I've seen your work. And then, the clincher. My name is Alice Munro, she would enunciate. My father was a fox farmer. She would then hand you a $2 bill in exchange for your literary pamphlet and walk down the street with it, leaving you both embarrassed and stunned, for this was no ordinary woman, but instead was Alice Munro. Why, you may ask, water skiing? Because, of course, of its inherent suspense. My father was a water skier. My mother hit him on the head by the water fountain, a block from the piazza, which was built by the Habsburger Empire during its reign of terror. What time did this occur? We do not know, for the chaplain had not yet repaired the clock. But one thing is for sure, the father had lost his job lazily. When the threads of a story tie up into a satisfying knot at the story's conclusion, there can be no greater frisson of satisfaction for writer nor for the reader. This is what it is all about. This is why we quit our job in order to write. This is the fox that has been farmed. So that was the first story, and I'm Claude Francois, and You Are a Bathtub, published by Anvil Press in 2022. And only you, whether or not you're a fox farmer, can make it a bestseller.